Hi, I'm Tom, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you for selecting my video. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to install these AIBOO undermount counter lights. This is an LED system that replaces a lot of what people have, which are these old halogen puck lights. That's puck, P-U-C-K, in case you thought I was saying something different there. These halogen puck lights, these kind of deteriorate over time. Mine are 12 years old. The light bulbs burn out real quickly. These plastic covers break off of them. The glass little lens falls out of them. So I'm going through my whole house replacing all these. I got a lot of them. So I'm getting to be an expert on this AIBOO installation. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. Now today's installation is specifically going to be for doing a retrofit for one of these AC powered halogen systems. This is not a new installation. If you're putting these lights in under a cabinet where you don't have any lighting right now, that's a much easier problem to solve than what I'm going to do here. But I'll still show you all the steps to go through. I'm just going to include a little bit of extra that shows you how to convert from an AC system to a DC system, which is a little bit complicated. Now, before we get started, I just want to clarify, I'm the homeowner. I'm doing this installation at my own risk, not affiliated with this company, not an electrician. If you do any of these changes, you're doing it at your own risk as well. If you're not comfortable working around electricity, you might want to hire somebody else to do this. Let's look at what's in the box. Now, I purchased a 6-pack today of these lights. I only have 4 lights to replace in today's install, but as I said, I'm going through the whole house, so I'm going to use these up. Let's see what's in each box. So when you order this, you get 6 of, in the 6-pack, these light fixtures. They have the wire attached to them. The end of this wire just plugs into a little hub. It's no wiring required. You just plug it in. And these are low voltage as well, so you don't have a risk of electrocution if you're using the standard installation. This is called the hub. This is really important because this is what all the lights have to plug into. And then you need one wire coming out of this going into your electrical plug here. So when you think about the distance that you have to travel in your configuration, you got to figure out how many lights you're replacing. How much distance do you have between those lights? You got to connect all the lights together, and then you got to get from this hub to the power source. So you want to really lay this out and think about that in advance. All the specifications for these are on the website in terms of how long those wires are. All of these also come with a dimmer switch. If you want to have a dimmer included, there's a little device that you put in series between the power source and the hub that will dim the lights, and then it comes with a little wireless keypad that you can use to punch in the level of brightness that you want. So here's the standard configuration. You need a power source. There's a on-off switch here between the power source and where this goes into the hub. You usually don't use this on-off switch. You can use it if you want. You just leave it in the on position if you're using the remote control. This on-off switch, if you don't want to use that, you can also take that off. That just plugs in here in series. When you get your power, if you want to use the LED dimmer, you need to install this little dimmer connector. This is basically the wireless control unit that will also send the dimmer signal to the power. This thing goes into the hub, and then coming out of the hub, you plug in your lights. That's the basic configuration of this whole system. And as I said, this hub will take up to 6 lights. There's all kinds of different configurations of this that you can buy on the internet. And with these hubs, some have 4 slots, some have 6, some have more. You can chain these together as well. They also sell connectors. So let's say I wanted to install 10 lights. I could buy 2 of these 6-way hubs, and then there's a jumper or a connector cable that goes between them. But when you're doing the math here, you got to think about this, because if I need to go from the jumper from this hub to the second hub, I'm using one of the slots here. So even though this is a 6-way hub, I can only put 5 lights on this. Then I have my jumper going from this hub to the next hub. I use one of those 6 slots. That gives me 5 more on that one. So even though I have 2 6-way hubs, you'd think I could put 12 lights on that. But if I need to connect these with a jumper to get power from this one to the next one, I lose 1 outbound on this side and 1 inbound on the other side. So I get 5 lights out of the 6 slots on this hub, 5 lights out of the 6 slots on the other hub. So you always have to remember that your power has to come out of one and into the other. As I mentioned when I talked about voltage, this is basically a low voltage adapter that goes from your 110 AC power if you're working in the United States. This will step this down to a low voltage. This is 12 volts DC output. So this whole system runs on low voltage. It's almost like battery power. So once you get this plugged into your outlet, all these wires downstream from the outlet are all at low voltage. Now what I'm going to show in this video is a real specific installation that's going to be a retrofit of an AC powered halogen light system with an integrated AC dimmer switch. Because if you want to try to replace that configuration, that's a very special type of installation of the AIBOO system, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Even if you're not using an AC powered AC dimmer switch, this will still be helpful to show you the basic configuration of the AIBOO undermounted cabinet light system. Now, if you have a current system like I do that runs off of an AC dimmer switch, you're going to have a switch like this or something with one of these wheels on it or something like that. This one has the little slider next to the switch. But basically, if your system has a switch like this, it's running off of AC power. So what's happening is your circuit breaker is coming through here at full power into this switch. And then when you move that dimmer switch up and down, that's regulating the amount of power that's going through the switch. Now, the way these undermounted systems are often installed is that power going through the switch then goes to an outlet like this. This looks like the standard outlet you'd see on your wall, but the power is being adjusted based on the dimmer switch coming into this outlet. Then your halogen system looks like this, typically plugs into an outlet. So this is coming off of the dimmer switch through the outlet, and then that's what dims these lights. That's the standard AC configuration that you'll see in a lot of these systems. So now the mistake a lot of people make is they say, oh, that's easy. I'll just buy this new system, and instead of plugging my halogen lights into it, I'm just going to plug this power converter into my dimmable outlet. This will not work. This is probably the most common mistake that people make because this is a DC converter. This needs to have a constant 110 power source coming into it for it to work. So you can't be regulating the power coming into this converter that doesn't actually work. So many people make that mistake. So don't do this. If you do want to keep your standard configuration where I have my dimmable AC power coming through my switch, I have dimmable power essentially coming through this outlet, there is another product that you need to buy to make this work with the AIBOO system. Let me show you what that is. This is the part you need. This is called a dimming LED driver. So see what this does? This takes my power out of my dimmable outlet, same outlet I was using for my halogen system, but it puts it through this magic converter that goes from AC power to DC power, and it adjusts for that dimmable power coming in. You absolutely need to have this. There are a couple different varieties of these out there. Wherever you're buying your AIBOO system, they'll usually have these dimmer drivers listed with it. And what's happening is this thing's doing two things at the same time. It's basically converting it to DC power. So I have this little plug here, just like on that black cable that would have gone into my outlet. Same plug, although it's white. Don't be confused by the color. And the second thing that it's doing is that it's dimming, but it's dimming off of your light switch. It's not dimming off of that wireless switch. So if you want to use this system, you have to use your dimmable light switch. You cannot use that LED dimmer and still use this little wireless control pad. You either have to use one or the other. So we got two options here, people. If you want to use your existing AC dimmer switch to control your LED lights, you cannot use this thing with it at the same time. You have to pick one or the other. So if I want to use my existing AC dimmer switch, I have to buy this LED dimmer driver. It's the only way these two things go together, the dimmer switch and this dimmer driver. If I want to use this little control pad here and I don't want to use my old AC dimmer switch anymore, then I can use the standard configuration. I just got to find a plain old electrical outlet that I can plug this thing into, not the dimmable one. And then you have to use your little dimmer thing in line here. This is the brains of the operation that's going to talk to this wireless unit. These two things together are essentially like your wired dimmer switch. If you don't understand anything I was just talking about with AC and DC power, don't do this installation. You could really injure yourself or burn down your house. So don't even try it. Hire a professional installer. But at least now you know what configuration you need based on how you want to control your dimmer switch That'll tell you what products you need to buy, and then hire a professional installer to do it for you. Let's get on with the job. Now what I'm going to do today is replace 4 of these lights that are up in the top part of this cabinet. 3 of them are burned out. I do know how to change a light bulb, but as I said, I want to upgrade this whole system. So I'm going to take 4 of these out. I'm going to put the 4 LEDs in, and I'm going to use my AC powered dimmer switch, this existing switch here over on the wall. So I'm going to use the AC power up there, and then I'm going to use that LED dimmer driver, that special part that I talked about, to step down that power and to be able to dim my lights off of that switch. So that's the installation. Let's start with disassembly. The first thing you want to do is see where your existing system's getting its power from. So basically, I know that I have power coming through my circuit breaker, through that light switch, and it's going to be going to a dimmable outlet somewhere in here because I know that's the way my whole house was wired. So I get up here on a step ladder and look what I found up here right above where my light is. Here's one of the existing cabinet lights. And in the wall here, these black wires go to my lights here, and these are connected to this dimmable outlet. How do I know it's dimmable? Because when I move my dimmer switch down below, I see the lights dimming and brightening. So that dimmer switch is coming into this outlet right here. Wire number 1 goes into this outlet. I'm going to remove that one. I got 3 more to account for here. And I see this white wire coming out here. Where does that go? That goes through that hole in the wall. Let's see what's over there. So they ran this extension cord through here, and then they plugged in light 2, light 3, light 4. So those are my 4 lights. These are the other 3. Let me unplug these. So now that I've unplugged all the power for these old lights, I just want to push these out of their current installation. Usually these are just snugly fit into a hole. So if you just grab that from the bottom and kind of shimmy that left and right, up and down, shimmy, shimmy. There it is. So that one's out. I'm going to take all 4 of those out like that. Here's the bottom view. There it is, one's done. So these are the 4 halogen lights that I just removed and a household extension cord, and this was just plugged into that dimmable outlet. That's how this was wired. So this didn't require an electrician to wire this. The electrician wired the switch up to the dimmable outlet, and that's where the power came from. Okay, I cleared my workspace. As you can see up there, I removed everything off of those shelves above and below to give me clear access. I really should have done that before disassembly because I have some precious things up there like this Johnny Cash glass. I almost broke that. That would have been a tragedy. Now the first thing you want to do for assembly is kind of lay it out in your mind. What are the parts that you need? How are you going to get power to your lights? So I got my dimmable AC outlet up there. So I need my special dimmer driver. This is step 1. I'm going to plug this into my dimmable outlet. That gives me dimmable power here. This switch is integrated in here. I always want this switch to be in the on position. I might even put a piece of tape over this just to make sure that it always stays in the on position. I don't ever want to experience getting up there and turning this switch on and off. It should always be on. So because I'm using this, I'm using my dimmer driver, which gives me my DC power conversion and my dimmable power to the LEDs. I'm not using this part, which is the DC power driver that came with the unit. I'm not using this dimmer insert because I got my own dimmer insert included in here. And I'm not using this remote control because this is not compatible if you're using an AC dimmer switch. So those 3 parts, I saved those for a future project. Maybe I'll use those with some of my other AIBOO installations in other parts of the house. So basically I got dimmed DC power so far in my configuration here. What comes next in the chain? My hub. So the next thing is I got my hub here. This little round jack plugs in here. So now I got dimmed power that I can split 6 ways. I only got 4 lights that I'm using here. So I take my 4 lights, I'm going to plug those into the hub. And the biggest trick here is just making sure you got enough length on your wire to reach all 4 of the lights that you're trying to reach to. I already know I did because I measured these before I bought this. But if you're doing a real long run over a long set of cabinets, as I said early on, you might need a 2-hub system to travel that entire length. But now, before I get up on a ladder and start screwing things in, I'm going to actually test this out to make sure that my logic works and make sure that all my power is working here. So let's test this out to see if it's going to work. So I plugged my AC dimmer driver into my dimmable AC outlet up there. I go through this on-off switch, which I always want in the on position. I'm going to put a piece of tape over that. into my hub. My hub goes to one of my 4 lights. This is wired into my existing AC light switch over here, which I'm going to turn on. I don't see anything because it's all the way dimmed down. Moving the power up, there we go. So in that all the way dimmed down, it actually dims off. And then there's my range of dimmability. That's running off my existing AC dimmer switch, not the one that came with the system. This is that special part that I bought. I can also turn it off, turn it on. So that AC switch works just the way that it did with my Halogen AC system. That's what this unit does for you. That dimmer driver converts AC to DC. So now I'm ready to install the lights. Now let me show you how this installation works. These lights are incredibly thin and they're incredibly delicate. You want to be careful when you're working with these. But the way you install these, there's 2 holes on the inside where you basically remove this top lens, open this thing up, and it gives you 2 screws to basically screw this up into your cabinet. So the way that you remove this lens, you turn that counterclockwise. I'm just unscrewing this very carefully, and it comes apart 2 pieces of the lens. This is the aluminum trim piece. And then there's that little lens, that little plastic lens in there. Be real careful with this because it's super delicate. Put that in a safe place. Here's what the inside of this looks like. Those little square chips in there, those are the actual LED lights. And what you see are those 2 holes on either side of that main hole. That's what I'm going to screw up into my cabinet. So this will mount up into the cabinet like this. So now I'm up here in my cabinet and I want to mount these in the same position, and look what happens. There's nothing to screw into because I got a big hole there. So you got 2 options. I either gotta move this over to the left and leave a gigantic hole in my cabinet. That looks kind of stupid. Or I gotta find a way to mount this in that existing hole. There's nothing to screw into. There's no way to attach it. So I'm right in the middle of the job. I'm ready to screw this thing in. I'm screwing into air. I got no wood up there to screw into. So this requires a little improvisation, but luckily that's my speciality. Let's go out to my workshop and I'll show you how to do this. So now you're into the heart of the operation. This is the Don't Screw It Up workshop and world headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio. This is where we solve the toughest problems on earth. So now I gotta figure out a way to screw this thing into thin air. So I got a couple of options. One is I could use a hole saw and cut some discs out of wood and try to glue them up into those holes and reform that wood so I'd have something to screw into. That's a little complicated. Another option would be to put a patch up on top of that wood, up on that top shelf, and use longer screws to go up into it. But if I want to be using that shelf up there, if I want to slide my Johnny Cash tumbler in there, I don't want to be hitting this thing on that shelf every time, so that's not a great option either. So I'm going to show you something I did on a prior attempt with these lights in a really inaccessible location. This will work for this current situation, and it will also work in situations where you don't have access up above the way that we do on this one. So this is a multi-purpose solution. So what I'm going to do is basically make a bracket out of this very thin aluminum. This is basically aluminum flashing. It's very thin. It's also very sharp. It's as sharp as a razor blade. You can cut your finger with that. I don't need to tell you how I know. But I'm going to use this aluminum and cut a little bracket that we're going to put on top of these, and it'll snap them right up into that hole. So I've cut a piece of this very sharp aluminum, and then I'm just going to cut a strip off of this. I cut this about 1/2 inch wide, and you don't have to worry about the length yet. And this can be a rough cut, doesn't need to be exact. This is super pliable, very easy, very thin to work with. So now I basically have this flat piece of aluminum. I'm going to put this on the back of this light fixture, and then I'm going to bend these corners up into little wings that'll give me the ability to snap that up into that hole. So you can see what I'm doing here on the camera. I basically have my light. I need to punch 2 holes into this little piece of aluminum. So I'm going to line those holes up right over the middle of this piece. I'm going to mark those with a Sharpie. So I just put a little ink down each one of those 2 holes. Gives me 2 markers on there for my distance. And I need to punch 2 holes in here. You always want to put something underneath it unless you want to punch holes in your workbench. I just need to just barely break the seal of that aluminum. You don't need to make a big hole there. Those are going to be our 2 screw holes. And then with the AIBOO system, you get this bag of these impossibly tiny screws that they want you to use here. which I'm going to try to do, I'm going to use my smallest possible Phillips tip on this because those screws are so small. And I'm going to screw this fixture through that aluminum strip. And you just want that to be snug. You don't want to go super tight because it'll just tear through that aluminum. That stuff is so soft. It's a little crazy to even be using a drill for this purpose. There we are. So here you can see what I did. I just screwed that bracket in through that aluminum. And because this light is so lightweight, this will hold it up. I mean, it's not really carrying any weight at all. Now I'm going to make 3 more of those bracket strips, and then we'll go inside and install them. So I just installed my wing bracket on the other 3 lights as well. So now I have 4 of these with that little wing bracket screwed on the back of this. So now I'm ready to install these in the cabinet. Now the trick to installing these, and I've done this a number of times so I kind of have a knack for it, is you have to bend these little wings into an L-shaped position on each side. So I'm going to do this close up to the camera. So what I'm doing here is this needs to fit up through the hole. So first we're going to do a U-shaped bend. I'm going to put my thumb right on the edge of the disc on the other side because this needs to fold up and go inside the hole from the bottom. So see how I did that? I just bent that back so that'll go up through the hole. I'm going to do that on both sides. Put my thumb right on the edge, fold down. There we go. So now this will go up through the hole, but now I need something to hold it from the top side. So you need to know the depth of your cabinet. Mine's 3/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to approximate 3/4 of an inch height on the side and just bend this down into a little L shape. And again, you'll get good at this over time. 3/4 of an inch on the other side, bend that into an L. And there's my bracket. So I can push that up through the hole, and that's going to hold itself in place. Now this is real handy if you have a certain type of cabinet configuration where it's very difficult to get on top of this. I mean, here it's easy because I can reach through that from the top shelf. There are certain configurations where you got to get these lights up in there. You might have a real small space you're working with and you can't actually get your hand in there. You got to fish the wire through it first. Then you can bend these wings in and push that up through the hole. See that? It'll go up through the hole and snap itself in place. This is really an ingenious operation. I'm going to put this in. Okay, I'm ready to put the first one in. Easy way to screw up this job is to forget to put the wire up through the hole first. A lot of times you get anxious, you go and you snap the light in, and then you got the wire dangling on the wrong side of the hole. So always feed your wire up first through the hole. Then I'm just going to carefully squeeze these wings together and push them up through the hole. I like to get one side in first, then squeeze the other side up and in. There it is. That's a snug, flush fit. That is really tight in there. That's not going anywhere. Now you do have the bracket sticking up on the top side. Let me show you that. So now here's what the bracket looks like on the top side. So these wings do sit up a little bit. I just put a little piece of tape over those, little piece of cellophane tape. They'll sit down perfectly flat and they'll stay there forever. So that's a good fit. As I said, you'll get used to bending those wings more accurately over time, but that's basically how that works. Now the other advantage of using that winged bracket on these is that you can put the lens back in and fully assemble this thing before you hang it. Now this is one of the trickiest parts of hanging these, and it really shouldn't be, is that if I hang this without the lens in it, it's incredibly difficult to get this bottom portion and the lens to fit in there properly because the lens needs to snap into this top portion, which you really can't do. It's very hard to do even with 2 hands when this is hanging. So what I recommend is actually put that lens cover back on like in this position before you actually hang the lights. It'll save you a huge amount of work and save you a lot of headaches. And as you're screwing that on, never force it because it's a super fine thread and it's such soft metal, it's really easy to bung up those threads. So I recommend practicing with this literally a couple of times before you hang these. Take this lens off, put the lens back in, get a feel for how those threads screw on there. That lens just snaps right in there. And then these threads, incredibly carefully, screw that on, never force it. You really got to get the hang of that, because this is an easy way to screw up that job. There we go. But if you forget to screw those on first, like I just did for all 4 of these, I'm going to show you how to do it when they're hanging. It's possible, but it takes a little practice. Now, if you do hang these before you put the lens on, there's only one way to do it. Here's the wrong way to do it, is you put the lens in the bottom and you just fish around and try it like 10 times and hope that that lens will pop up into that top part of the bracket. It won't. It's almost impossible to get it up in there. So before you start, you got to take that wafer thin lens and you got to actually put that in place where you want it, and hold that with your left hand. Now, as I put the ring up here, I'm putting my thumb up through the middle, and now I'm holding it with my left thumb. So that lens has to be in that top unit before you can screw the bottom on. If it's not fitted perfectly in that top part of the unit, this bottom piece won't go on. And you carefully, very carefully, thread that on. Never force it. There it is. So I plugged the 4 lamp wires into that 6-way hub. Now let's test it out. So I got my AC powered dimmer switch here in the lowest dim position. So crank that up, crank it up, crank it up. Look at that. That's a thing of beauty. Crank it down. That's the lowest dim position. Now that's interesting, because when I only had 1 lamp hooked up to that, it dimmed all the way to dark. Now it dims to kind of a semi-dark. That's part of the nature of using these LED dimmers with an AC switch, is you'll get some peculiar dimming capability. So this dims mostly down, but not as dim as a full AC dim. Pretty close. Then lastly, you want to tuck all your wires away, tape them down, get them all out of the way. I like to put them around the back perimeter of that cabinet, so I leave all that space available to put my collectible mugs and things up there. I hope you found this helpful. Good luck on your next project, and don't screw it up.